So my name is Miki, and I had worked on issues on women, peace, and security for the last 30 years. And my work started in my native country of Bosnia and Herzegovina, in my hometown of Sarajevo. I was 20 years old when the war started. And overnight, everything changes. From a peaceful, prosperous country, the war came into our homes, our schools, and our streets. And it had a profound impact, not just on me or my family, on the community, but on the notion now how the world see the reality of changed nature of warfare. Because now the solutions that will bring peace are actually grounded in what's happening in the communities. And therefore, how we think and how we decide about peace and security is really in the hands of the local communities, primarily local women, who often are the first to find solutions to these intractable conflicts. And so I have seen firsthand, starting in my own country and then working for the last 30 years in more than 60 other nations, how the impact of war significantly affects the community, but also how we use women, peace, and security agenda to change these decisions in order to create sustainable peace. In that regard, one area that I work with is national action plans. And those are the tools that the national governments use to translate the policy framework and important policy progress we have made since the adoption on Resolution 1325 21 years ago into the realities to make concrete actions and make difference for ordinary men and women on the ground. National action plans are thus a tool to translate all of these promises into new realities so that eventually all these important gender considerations are part of all policy making, design, implementation, and monitoring of all the things that are based on inclusion and equality in a way that ensures good governance and prosperity for all. National action plans are obviously a tool. They are not a perfect tool, but for the last 15 years in particular, I've had a great privilege of working mostly with governments, in some countries also with civil society, to create the political will, then to design and implement the plans and look into their impact. And what we have seen is, again, significant progress. But I want to invite you and others, not just in the Focal Point Network, but beyond, to really look at what are some of the best lessons and practices that can help us even further use national action plans and, more importantly, make a difference. In that regard, we had worked on a platform that is essentially something called high impact national action plans. So how do we turn these processes in these documents that sometimes could just be a paper on the shelf into really a living, breathing tool that, again, policymakers, government officials, and ordinary citizens can use to create a peaceful society? The impact has 6 frameworks. One starts with the political will. And right now, literally this week, I'm working with the governments of Sudan and Libya that are currently going through a major transition. And as a first statement of their own political will towards more equal and inclusive society, they have prioritized creation of the National Action Plan. And therefore, this political will is critical at this higher level, such in these countries, but also at the level of focal point networks, which is, again, civil servants, technical experts, people working at various levels of different ministries who are then able to take this political directive and include it into their own operational plans. Second is design. So how do we plan for results? How do we use modern management technologies and techniques to really focus on what is the difference that we want to make? And in that sense, for example, the government of Uganda is really doing quite innovative work right now in their 3rd National Action Plan that includes not only the overall strategic document, but also operational plan for each ministry, monitoring and evaluation plan with specific indicators, a communication plan, as well as plan to resource the implementation. The third element of that high impact framework is coordination, which is a critical component because people often, focal points and others across the governments, know how it is actually a challenging task to coordinate in general within your own ministry. But imagine for something like women, peace and security, you need to involve some hard ministries such as defense, interior, ministry of security, border patrols, etc. And then ministry of social welfare, ministry of women's affairs, ministry of development. So it's quite a large contingent of government actors that need to be involved and coordinated. And so several tools and methodologies have been really invented, creating a steering committee such as we know exists from places like Afghanistan to Canada to Nepal. The fourth element is civil society inclusion, which is, of course, critical in all the stages from consultations. And what we have seen, for example, in a country like Jordan, civil society was a key partner to government doing consultations across the country, including the refugee camps, to really get the insights of what are the key problems and what can be the way that both civil society and government can tackle these issues together. The next one is a key element of monitoring and evaluation, which is my specialty. And this is where I want to invite us together to really work in using many of the tools that exist, such as, for example, indicators, resources, guidelines, things that the Focal Point Network already has worked on, to really work together both in measuring the things that we can count, such as, for example, the number of women at peace negotiations, but also really using the importance of qualitative indicators that can track transformative nature of this agenda so that we can really explain the key difference that we make in ordinary people's lives. And then finally, and in ways also quite importantly, is resourcing, not just obviously critically important financial resources, but even more human and technical resources, which are so critical towards the implementation. So finally, I want to conclude again by inviting us to jointly build on the resources we have developed over the last 10 years, work together, understand both the importance that all countries should have the national action plans. We are almost at 100, and we can all do better, but also focus on the key implementation. And I will close with the example of Liberia, where I worked originally on the National Action Plan right after the big transition in that country. And I recall in the processes of consultation and drafting the National Action Plan, when the women of Liberia really led the change in that country, they were for the first time part of the decision and policy making to create a National Action Plan. And when they were working with security sector, how often they highlighted that with this process, they can help turn the police, the military, the security sector in their country to something that they as citizens can use. They can turn towards for help rather than a force that they were afraid for all their lives. And so this is just one of many examples where we can use this tool of national action plans to really improve the ordinary lives of many, many people and create inclusive and equal societies, which at the end is the ultimate goal of Women, Peace and Security agenda.